Welcome to this taste of the 48th Woodend Lions Art Show, an annual event. What you'll see today is the judges' commentary on each of the prize winners that they chose, and maybe out of the corner of your eye you'll see something else that interests you. In a pleasingly growing field of junior entries, two works stood out for the judges: Eliza Ransom for Tiger's Eye and Sam Ransom for Night Snowman. I think you'll enjoy them.
We found it very difficult to judge the junior
we
prize
did.
because so many of these paintings and drawings are brilliant. But in the end, we chose the Tiger Eye. Just the level of detail and skill for, I believe she's 12 years old.
Yeah,
it's
12,
incredible.
Yeah, it's nice to see someone's paying a lot of attention and looking, and then looking again to make sure that they are really pulling off the style.
Those soft transitions in the actual eyeball as well. For a 12-year-old to do that with colour pencil.
There's a lot of good technique in there. Really has a really fantastic sense of looseness, devil-may-care attitude, but also just an understanding of colour.
It is quite unusual for a child to use such a dark palette.
I'd have to agree, yeah. It doesn't seem like this is their first go at a snowman.
Snow at Night. It's like they understand tone.
Yes. Yeah.
And tonal values, because I feel like usually a child, if they were painting a snowman, would just use white.
Yeah.
No matter what time of the day it was, would just be using white. But you've got, it's clearly at night time, and you can see the cast shadow on the snowman. He goes from dark to lighter as well, which is quite remarkable.
In a category that really appeals to us locals, the best local artist went to Julia Baichi for Bohemian Feast, a tribute to her mother.
So Amanda, why did we decide that this one would be the best local artist?
Well, I think it's a really great example of alla prima painting. Very fresh, loose, very vibrant as well.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's definitely a painting that once you walk into a room you really notice it, and it does have a lot of presence. The actual palette of this painting really drew me to it when I first saw it, because it does have a romantic feel.
It's a great example of alla prima painting. It's very fresh, very vibrant, great sense of space and depth in the painting.
So it's quite a difficult task to do, to pull that off, I think. Pull out the colour as well as create a little bit of mood.
In a field that's growing in the number of artists and works entered, Elizabeth Langslow, Portrait of My Father, won Best Photograph in Show.
It was quite a striking portrait. I love how dirty and gritty his face and hands are as well. And this grass in the foreground over his arm, over his torso, I guess, adds another layer of depth and kind of breaks up the darkness in the centre.
Yeah, it was a good compositional decision, because otherwise that area would be very, very dark. It adds another point to lead the eye around the picture. Yeah, it feels like he's from the bush, which I guess is the idea.
Yeah.
I guess that's the idea, yeah. A judge maybe who can work the land or has worked in regional areas. But it's Elizabeth's father?
Portrait of her dad, yes.
Portrait of her father, yeah. Which is, it's a very, very statuesque. So obviously she feels quite strongly about him, and he is a judge who would clearly take himself quite seriously.
I think just the fact that it's a judge in the bush, in the landscape.
Once we worked out he was a judge.
Yeah.
Yeah, then it took on a whole separate set of meaning in stature, I guess. But he is looking wistful away from the audience, which isn't necessarily typical of a portrait of a judge. Or maybe he's looking over a career that's past.
In the broadly sprawling category of Best Other Media, Freya McKinnon for Artichoke No. 4 won the category.
This technically is a brilliant drawing.
It certainly is. Yeah, there is some absolutely beautiful pushes from dark to light and done in very different, interesting ways with a very, very fine, controlled hand. So I think this work was very successful. For me, you know, I'm a drawer, so when I look at this, I can see that the artist clearly has command of their skill and their technique, but done in a very interesting way. It's not done in a pedestrian, rendered light to dark. For me, there's some beautiful little passages of very, very fine lines that are denoting the form in such a successful way. People would say that it's almost abstract, but it's just that being able to imbue an image with a texture to help the form really brings it to life. And also, you know, the three-dimensional feeling of this is very successful, I think. Well, look at this here, that's...
Oh, I know.
Nobody would intentionally make these forms do that unless you were looking at something that was doing that. But it's been handled in a very delicate manner. So it's represented through light and dark, but you know what's in the foreground, what's in the background.
Well, that's, I think, one of the common factors we've had throughout this whole judging is everything does have a good sense of depth, doesn't it? But spatial awareness.
Well, depth of field, I think, is very important in an artwork. It's what leads you in, I think. It draws you in.
And the watercolour prize is by Judy Perfect, Winterlight Guildford. I think you'll enjoy it.
This is a watercolour, Winterlight Guildford, which I think is quite an apt title for this work, because it does feel like we're in winter or early throes of winter.
It's got that coolness overall.
An interesting angle for a watercolour, and the composition, I think it's got quite a nice tension on the page.
Well, that nice fade out as you go further back.
Yeah. Which is interesting because traditionally in landscape painting, you put a little more darkness in the foreground and go lighter in the background, or to create a sense of depth, but this is almost going in the reverse.
The looseness of the brushwork in this back area here, it's very, very loose but quite controlled as well. It's just a few little brush strokes, but you do get that sense of space. Well, the composition is quite dynamic as well, just with that triangle.
Yeah, I agree.
Which draws you in and back.
Yeah, definitely. It does. It's got a nice sense of depth to it. You've got that tree just in here, which looks very realist in a sense. And I think there's a bird flying just above the cloud line. So it's quite nice. There's a lot of really nice little details that have been captured.
The judges were hard pressed to pick the best oil and acrylic in the show, but they chose 85 John Walsh Evening Light at Hanging Rock.
So Amanda, you're saying that the rock is quite magical. Do you think that this picture picks up the magic of the place?
Well, it does, especially the lighting on the rock and the field in front as well. Is that the glow, like the rock glows, that's how it looks at that time of the evening.
And the subtleties of the transitions of the oil all the way through it. It actually has been handled very nicely. There's some really nice nuances that have captured the theme, or the feel, the eeriness that that has. Yeah, I think so. Traditionally, for a landscape, it's important to put something in the foreground, a midground, and then have your background. And this has successfully done that structure quite well. But I think the standout for me is just the play of depth, and also mentioning before the colours, the transitions really are quite successful.
But that is exactly, like when I'm on my back paddock looking at the rock, that's the light that I see, like those colours are very accurate. But as you were saying before, that brightness of that midground really pushes the rock back to give that sense of depth.
Yeah,
in the painting.
it really does tip the painting, gives it that nice sense of depth.
It's with great pleasure that I announce the Best in Show, Carolyn Moroney, Trash or Treasure, number 114, a watercolour.
Yeah, I think we're both in agreement that this was the standout work of the show. The artist's endeavour of planning, then the actual structure, and then the actual sitting and rendering all of these objects in such a beautiful, careful and considered way truly is a testament to a high level of skill, dedication and tenacity, I'd say.
The level of detail in each single object as well, and the ability to depict the texture of the objects, like the transparency of the glass, the textures in the wood.
Yeah, there's a real good push and pull of depth, which is really interesting. You know, things are overlapping. There's, again, I say nuances, but you know, there's a lot of love and care that's gone into it, which is, it's really, really quite interesting because you can get right up and personal with it and look right into the work.
Each time you look at it, you see something new as well.
It's interesting to note with a work like this, it sort of is also representative of an artist's career when you think that we tend to compartmentalise a little bit. You know, we see snippets of things that we like, that we'd like to record, but you know, actually assembling them all together and saying here they are, it's quite an ambitious work.
The level of detail is quite amazing, and the ability to depict the different textures in each of the objects, like the transparency of the glass, you know, the wood grain. See the little mouth.
Yeah, I like that. That tin is actually really interesting. And there's a photograph stuck right in the middle too. There's a key here.
I didn't notice the key either.
Yeah, I think every time you come back to it, there's going to be something to find. Keep you entertained for hours.